Hashem, today's Daf Yomi. Today's Zevachim Tzadi Tes, Zevachim 99. Today's Daf Yomi, the Gemara starts on top of 99a by saying, Menahani Mili. Where do we know this basic idea that if we had said in our Mishnah that if somebody was not if he was not fit to do the avodah at that time of the carbon, he doesn't get a portion in the meat of the carbon, or really, or any part of the carbon. So the Gemara says, what's the source of this idea? Amar Reish Lakish. It's based upon the fact that the Amar Kra, that there's a pasuk that says, HaKohen HaMechateosa Yochoena, the Kohen who applies the blood, he gets to eat from the blood, which means Kohen HaMechateh Ochel, the Kohen who applies the blood, he gets to eat. She'ena Mechateh, if he doesn't apply the blood, Eino Ochel, he doesn't get to eat from it. So only the Kohen who applies the blood gets to eat from it. Gemara says, really? Is this a rule? Mishmara Kula, the whole Mishmar of Kohanim was there serving the temple that day, or they're serving in the temple. The Beis Av serves that day. The Mishmar has that week, but still, Haray Mishmara Kula, they all don't apply the blood, but Ochan, and yet they get to eat from it. Only one person applies the blood. So Gemara says, no, we say as long as you're roy, as long as you're fit to be applying the blood, then you get to eat from it. Gemara says, well, we have a problem with that too. Aray katan, the Eino roy, the katan himself, a minor, he can't apply the blood. Eino roy but ochel, and yet he gets to eat it. So therefore, it says the Gemara, what does it mean when it says Kohen Mechatel Yochola? Now the Kohen who applies the blood eats it. What does that mean? What does that mean, Yocholana? Yechal Kena. He gets to divide it up. Roi Lechitoi, if he's capable of doing the Chitoi, Cholek, he gets a portion of it. She'ena Roi Lechitoi, if he's not capable of applying the blood, Eino Cholek, he doesn't get a portion of it. He could still eat from it. The Katan could still eat from it, but he doesn't get the portion. The portion is divided up to, let's say, his father, and his father decides to share with him to eat, but he doesn't get a portion. If a share, he's not a shareholder in that korban unless he's royal, unless he's capable of doing the application of the blood. So the Gemara says, well, that also is not hold. Hare Baal Mum, what about a Kohen with a blemish? The Eino royal, he's not capable of doing the application. The Cholik, and yet he still gets a portion of the korban. The Gemara says, no, Baal Mum, Rachmana Rabbi. The Torah itself specifically added the Kohen who has the blemish, because it says, Kol Zachar B'Kohanim, that every male amongst the Kohanim shall eat the korban, Yochal also, which comes Rabos Baal Mum, comes to include the Baal Mum. And so therefore, that's why the Baal Mum gets a portion. The Gemara says, well, why do we say that the pasuk is including the Kohen with the blemish? Ema Kol Zachar Rabos Tvul Yom. Maybe it's coming to include the Kohen who immersed that day, but it's not yet at nightfall, not have Harav Shemesh. Maybe he is the one who gets to be included in the korban. The Gemara says, no, Mistabra Baal Mum. It's logical to assume that the Baal Mum is the Kohen is being included. Shekain Ochel, because he gets to eat from that korban. Adarabba, says the Gemara, just the opposite. Tvul Yom. It's more logical to assume that the Tvul Yom is the one who's being included. Because that night he would be able to serve and to bring the parts that go up at night. So the Gemara says, at this point he's still not capable of serving, so therefore we assume that the Baal Mum is the one that the Torah includes in getting a portion, and not the Tvul Yom. So the Gemara says, Rav Yosef gives a different explanation for the idea. Rav Yosef gives a different idea of what it says. And he says, and on the basis of that pasuk, he tells us another reason why a Tvul Yom is not included. So it says, Rav Yosef Amar Michte Ma Yochoana. What does it mean when it says Yochoana? That the Kohen who applies the blood will get to eat from it. Yechal Kena. It means that the Kohen who applies the blood, he gets a portion. So Michte Ma Yochoana Yechal Kena. Well, if that's the case, Lichtov Rachmana Yechal Kena. So why doesn't the Torah write Yechal Kena? So it says, Ma Yochana Shmamina Roy Lachi Lacholek. It's to teach us that somebody who's capable of he's able to eat it, he gets a portion. And that's the Baal Mu'am, the Kohen who has the blemish. But if he's not able to eat it at that moment, Eino Cholet, then he doesn't get a portion of the carbon. So now we're in the middle of 99a. Reish Lakish asks the question, Baal Mu'am. Now we said a Baal Mu'am is capable, he gets a portion, and he can eat from the carbon, even though he has a blemish. But V'hu Tameh, Kohen is Tameh, does not get a portion, and he does not get to eat from it. But let's say the Baal Mu'am is Tameh. Do we say, the way some Achronim explain it is, do we say the Torah, since the Torah had so to speak, Rachmanis on the Kohen with the Baal Mu'am allows him to get a portion, and even though he's Tameh, we also allow him to get a portion. The Baal Mu'am, V'hu Tameh, let's say he's blemished, but he's also Tameh. Does he get a portion? We say, Kivin Chazi, V'rachmana Rabia, since he's not fit to apply the blood, and the Torah yet included him, Woshna, Mali Tameh, Mali Baal Mu'am. Then we don't care, even if he's Tameh, or a Baal Mu'am, he's able to apply the blood, and not apply the blood. He's able to get a portion of the carbon. Oh, Dilmar, maybe we say or do we say no? When does he get a portion? Only if he's only if he's capable of eating it. And since he's tamei, he's not capable of eating it, so he wouldn't get a portion despite the fact that he's a Baal Mu'am. So Gemara says, how do we answer this question? Amar Rabba Tashma. Let's answer from the case of the Kohen Gadol. So what's the case of the Kohen Gadol? Kohen Gadol Makriv Onen. He brings an offering while he's in Onen. And Onen is Rahmano's son, that one of his close relatives died. So the Kohen Gadol still has to bring the offering, Ve'eno Ochel, and he does not get to eat from the carbon, Ve'eno Cholek, Ve'chol Erev, and he doesn't get a portion to eat it at night. Shema Mina, we see from here, Roi Lachila, that when do you get a portion? Only if you're capable of eating. Roi Lachila Ba'inan, only if you're capable of getting a portion. Shema Mina, indeed we learned that from here. So now by Rav Oshaya, he has a different question. Tamei bekarbanos tzibor ma'al sheyechukulo. So let's say there's a communal offering, which a tamei person is capable of bringing, because Tuma is hotra b'tzibor. And so in this case, the Tahorim were the ones who apply the carbon, but he's Tameh, so will he get a portion of that communal offering? Tameh b'karbanon tzibor ma'al sheyechukulo. Mi amrina, do we say, Amechata amarachmanan, one who could apply the blood gets a portion, and since this Kohen could, even though he's tamei, he could apply the blood because it's a communal offering. Or maybe we say you have to be roi l'achila, and since he's not capable of eating at that time, he doesn't get a portion. So Amar Avina Tashma. Let's bring a proof from the Kohen Gadol then. Kohen Gadol makriv onen ve'eno ochel. So the Kohen Gadol will bring it while he's in Onain, but he doesn't get to eat from it. And he doesn't get a portion to eat that night. So you need, in order to get a portion, you need to be capable of eating it. Shema Mina. So now we say Onain Nogeya ve'ino makriv. The Onain said in our Mishnah, he could touch the carbon without making it tamei ve'ino makriv, but he does not make it. But he does not bring the offering. So now the Gemara says, Onen Nogeya. Is it really the case that the Onen is able to touch the carbon without making it tamei? Veramini. But we have a contradiction because we learn in the Mishnah Chagiga, Onen u'mechusar kippurim, tzrichen tvila, that an Onen cannot touch it because the Onen and the one who is mechusar kippurim, that is lacking the complete atonement, the zava, metzor, and yoedes, they require the carbon in order to be completely be able to enter the base of mikdash. They require tzrichen tefillah u'kodesh before they could touch the kodshim. They require immersion. So we see from here that the onen is not able to touch it. Means say they're prohibited rabbinically as long as they haven't touched it. So and the reason is that since they're biblically prohibited to eat it, so therefore rabbinically we say they can't touch it. But anyway, we see from here that the onen is not able to touch it. So I'm Rabbi Ami, I'm Rabbi Yochanan, well, kasha, kam b'shetavo, kam b'shelotavo. So no, our Mishnah, which says he can touch it, it's because he immersed already. And the Mishnah in Chagiga, which says he can't touch it, is where he has not yet immersed. So the Gemara says, "V'chitavo my avi." What are you talking about? Even if he immersed in the mikvah, how does that help? The whole reason why he's tummy is because he's in onain. So even if he immersed, the anino says return to him. The second comes out of the mikvah, he's in onain again. Gamma Rabba Barafuna, onain shetavel, aninu so choser salav. Is that Rabbi Barafuna taught that if the onain immerses in the mikvah while he's still in onain, on the day of the death, he comes back to him. The anino says choser salav. So the Gemara says, "Lo kasha hada asach taite hada lo asach taite." So there where it's here where it says he's allowed to touch it, it's because he didn't have hesach hadas. He didn't lose focus, and he made sure he didn't touch tameh. And whereas in chagiga he didn't have focus, and so therefore he needs to immerse first. The Gemara says, well, hesach hadas, if he didn't have focus, shlishi shvi by. He shouldn't be able to just immerse in the mikvah. He should require the ashes of the red heifer on day 3 and day 7, because we said. I'm Rabbi Yostai, Rabbi Maton, I'm Rabbi Yochanan, Hesach Hadas, Tzarach Hazor, Shlishi Ushvi, that if you have Hesach Hadas, that you're not focused, you don't protect yourself from coming in contact with a dead body, you need immersion on day 3 and day 7. The Gemara says, Lo Kasha. Hada Hesach Hadate mitame meis, Hada Hesach Hadate mitame sheret. No, where you add Hesach Hadas from coming in contact with a dead body, then you require ashes of the red heifer. But here, we're talking about a case where you made sure you didn't touch the dead body, but you didn't make sure you didn't touch a sheret. And so therefore, that's why the Mishnah Chagiga says you need to immerse first. So the Gemara says, well, still, that Tamei Sheretz, Tamei Ma'ayo. Well, no, Tamei Sheretz, if you didn't have focus to prevent yourself from touching a Sheretz, that's actual Tumah. And you should be, it's not enough to just immerse in the mikvah. Erev Shemesh by you require he would require nightfall in order to be able to touch the kachim. So v'od afilu trumanami, and also he should even to come in contact with truma, he should require even to eat the truma. He should require immersion, because the Tamei Sheretz is not allowed to eat it. Why does our Mishnah say Tfilah Kodesh of a lower Truma? It says he doesn't require for Truma. So the Mishnah there is difficult for that. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yirmiyah, but Omer, where he says Nishmarti, this is the answer of Rabbi Yirmiyah. He says Nishmarti midavar mitameini, Nishmarti midavar poslani. He says I make sure to watch myself from Tumah D'Oraisa, which would from biblical Tumah, which I would acquire the sun setting at night, but not from Tumah that would be poslani, that would rabbinically prohibit me from eating kachin to the rabbanim, which I don't require nightfall. And also by Truma, he says I wasn't careful to watch me from something that would be disqualifying me from eating the truma rabbinically. And Rashi says, if you don't get too worked up about this, because it's a shinoi dechiku, it's a fourth answer. We're not going to conclude that way. But anyway, at this point, that's what the Gemara says. He says, I only watch from certain things. The Gemara says, well, can you really have a half a watching? Can you have a half a protection? Can you really have a half a protection? The Gemara says, yes. Vatanya, we have a brisa that supports it. This is a brisa we already had in also Maseches Chagiga. That let's say a person was walking around with a basket on his head. That's how they used to carry baskets, and they still carry it in many countries. Odeo Salaro. So he had a basket of figs on his head. Uma Greifa. We're on top of 99. Uma Greifa Bitocho. And he has the utensil. Rashi says an iron utensil, and it's and that's what they use to separate the figs. That was in it. He says, I'm watching the basket to make sure it doesn't become tummy that has the figs in it, but I don't care about it. I'm not watching the utensil. So under those circumstances, hasal tahor, the basket will be tahor, v'amagrefa tmeya, and the basket is tamei. I mean, the basket's tahor and the utensil is tamei. So because he didn't make sure to protect the utensil from becoming tamei. And the Gemara says, "V'titra ma'greifo asal." Well, why doesn't the basket make? Why doesn't the utensil make the basket tamei? No, that won't work because as a general rule, even though it's not always the case, ain kli matame kli. One utensil cannot make another utensil tamei. Well, if that's the case, still v'titra masha b'socha. Why don't the figs that are inside the basket become tamei? But Amarava ba'omer shemartia midavar metame lo shemartia midavar haposla. He said, no, the answer is where he says, the one who's holding the basket says about the magrefa, I watched it from something that would make it tamei, but not from something that would make it post sale. And so tamei, if it's tamei, it can make it's enough of a potency to make something else to transmit the tumah. But if it was post sale, then it can't transmit the tumah. So anyway, we see from here that the magrefa itself, he can watch for part things and not for other things. And so that proves that you could have a nitiruso apolga. You could do a half of a protection. So the Gemara says, Igalgal milsa lekame so Galgal milsa matal kame de Rabbi Ami bar Mamo. So the matter was kicked around, and not kicked around, it was rolled around, it was discussed and handled, and it went in front of Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo. Amar, he says, I don't understand your question. Again, what is the question that we're talking about? The question is, we have the contradiction between our Mishnah that says Onain does not make it tummy, and the Mishnah Chagiga, which says the Onain does make it tummy. So we go milso matal coming to Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo, and Amar so he says, if somebody eats a third degree of tumah, then he becomes a shlishi l'tumah, and he cannot eat the truma, but he's still going to be allowed to touch it because it's just the stringency that you can't eat it. That the Chama made a takana to say that the food is shlishi. And that he can't eat the truma, but that was only for eating and not for touching. So we see with respect to achila, the Rabbana made a maila that you can't eat it, but that doesn't apply to touching. And so therefore, by the onain, we say he can't eat the kachim, but he can still touch it. Okay, that's an easy distinction, and so that's the conclusion. So it says in our Mishnah that an onain touches, but he does not bring the offering, and he does not get a portion of it to eat that night when he's no longer an onain. So miflag who do a poet. So the Gemara says, wait 1 second. It means he doesn't get a portion. He doesn't get the portion of it. But you mean to say that if but if his friend wants to give him his portion that night after he's no longer an onain, then he would be allowed to. Is that really the case? Viramini, but we have a contradictory Mishnah in Pesachim where the Mishnah tells us onain tovel v'ochlas pislo erev of a lobekachim. Now, when it comes to the carbon Pesach, an onain is allowed to immerse in the mikvah during the day, and he can eat the carbon Pesach that night, but not regular kachim. And why would he be able to eat the carbon Pesach at night of not kachim? So the Gemara Rashi says, the Gemara there in Pesachim explains, Aninos Laila, the fact that the Aninos is the day of the death, the fact that the prohibitions of Aninos extend to the night is only rabbinic. Aninos Dioraisa, the biblical Aninos is only 1 day, as it states, V'acharisa kiyom mar, it's a bitter day. V'gabe Pesach, and by Pesach, where it's a kares, if you don't eat the Korban Pesach, the rabbis did not establish that it's prohibited to eat it. But by Gabe Kachim, where they say, but by Kachim, that there's a positive commandment for Kachim to be eaten, even though it's not clear that this person has to eat it. And so therefore, the rabbis established the principle that the owner can't eat it. But by Pesach, it's kares. But by Kachim, the rabbi said they can't eat it. So again, we have a contradiction. Our Mishnah implies that he can eat it, but the Mishnah Pesachim says he can't eat it. So I'm Rav Yirmiyah B'difti. Well, kasha, kama Pesach, kama b'shar Yemos Hashanah. Well, it depends what day of the year it is. if it would be Pesach or if it be the other days of the year. On Pesach, we would allow you to eat it, but the other days of the year, we wouldn't. So the Pesach, I did Achal Pesach, since on Pesach, where he's already going to be allowed to eat the Korban Pesach, Achal Nami Kachim. Our Mishnah is saying he would be allowed to eat the Kachim on Pesach. But the rest of the year, he can't eat the Pesach, Lo Chazi. Therefore, we're not going to allow him to eat the Kachim either. So the Meir says, oh my, but what are you talking about? What it says, Ochel is Pischo Erev, but lo b'kachim, but he doesn't eat the kachim. You got a question?
Why would he eat the Pesach?
No, he wouldn't. That's why, since he's not allowed to eat the Pesach, since he's not eating the Pesach the rest of the year, you don't have it. You don't. That's why it's saying, since it's not there, you can't eat it. So the Gemara says, but what? How do you do with the language? How do you deal with the language of the Mishnah? It says that you can eat it. You can eat it on Pesach of a low bekachim, but not kachim, which implies to say on that night you can't eat the kachim. So Gemara says, "My have a low bekachim." No, it means have a low bekachim shakol Hashem. The rest of the year you can't eat it. Right? So that's the first answer. The Gemara, that's Rabbi Yirmiyah Difti's answer. Rabbi gives a different answer. Again, how do we explain the contradiction between our Mishnah here, which implies that kachim can be eaten by the onain, and the Mishnah in Pesachim, which says it can. So the first answer is it depends if it's night of Pesach or the rest of the year. Rabbi tells Lakasha, Kansha Meso Meis Barbasar. One is where the person died, his relative died on the 14th, the Kavru Barbasar, and Kansha Meso Meis B'Shoshasar, the Kavru Barbasar. One is where the actual death was on the 14th, and then we say that night we're strict, and he also can't eat the kachim rabbinically. But where we said that the death was on the 13th and the burial was on the 14th, then that night we're not going to be strict. So Yom Kfura, since it's just the day of the death, the burial, not the day of the death, the rabbis were not strict to prohibit the kachim. So the Gemara says, who's the author? The Mishnah Pesachim, who says that since it's only rabbinic, therefore Pesachim you eat, but the Pesach you eat, but not the kachim. That's Rabbi Shimoni. The Tanya Aninos Lailo Midivrei Torah. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says Aninos that night is biblical, and therefore there wouldn't be a distinction between Pesach and kachim. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Omer Onein Eno Midivrei Torah El Midivrei Sofrim. He says no. The idea of an onein, that the onein cannot eat from the kachim, that's only rabbinic, not biblical. And Teda, and I'll prove to you, says Rabbi Shimon, Shari Amru, Onin Tovel Ochas Pisco Erev, below Bekachim. Says the Onin can immerse and eat his Korban Pesach that night, but not Kachim. And if it's biblical, it should also be prohibited to eat the Korban Pesach. V'savar Rabbi Shimon Aninos Laila Midrabanan. So Gemara says, do you really think Rabbi Shimon's of the position that Aninos at night is rabbinic? So the Sever Rabbi Shimon Anino Slaila Midrabanan. Do you really think that? Rabbi Shimon Omer Onein Eno Mishaleach Karbonosav. Rabbi Shimon says an Onein is not able to bring his carbon and turn the time as Aninas, even through other people. My lab, when it says this law afiu b'Pesach, doesn't it mean that he cannot even bring the Korban Pesach through other people in order to eat it that night? And so we see from here that he says that onein is biblical. The Gemara says no, levarben Pesach. No, he would allow the Korban Pesach. Is that really the case? Or Rabbi Shimon says that an onein cannot, that an onein can bring the Korban Pesach, because we have a brayso where Rabbi Shimon says specifically that the onein cannot bring the Korban Pesach. So how do we see this? Again, Rabbi Shimon, we are arguing that Rabbi Shimon says onein is derabanan, and that's why he could bring the Korban Pesach. But now we're going to say a source that Rabbi Shimon says he cannot bring the Korban Pesach. What's a source? Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer, going through all the karbanos. Now you cannot bring this karbanos when you're an onein. Shlamim, when can you bring a korban shlamim? Kushu shalem mevi, ve'en mevi kushu onein. You can only bring the korban shlamim when you're complete. Where the shlamim is simcha, joy. It's not when your joy is incomplete. How do we know that the Thanksgiving offering you can't bring when you're an onein? Korban Toda has to be in with joy, like the korban shlamim. Minayla Rabba says Ola. How do I know also the Ola can be brought as an onin? Marbani is Ola Shekain Ba Beneder or Nedava Kishlam. It's brought in a voluntary manner, which is also like the shlamim. So therefore, we include the oa too. How do we include these other karbanos? We say specifically the korban pesach cannot be brought as an onim, which means to say that aninos laila is rabbinic, is biblical. They don't come through a sin, just like the shlamim. That they can be brought as an onain, all these other offerings. Karbano. Kol karbanos mevi kishu shalem mevi ve'enu mevi kishu onin. You can't bring it as an onin. Anyway, but we see explicitly from this source, Katani Mia Pesach, that the korban Pesach cannot be brought as an onin. And so therefore we wouldn't be allowed to eat it, which means that it's biblical. Amar Rav Chisda. So we're going to see several answers to this question. The first answer to this question comes from Rav Chisda. He says, Pesach Kadei Naspe. He says, no, don't just basically Pesach is lav dafka. Doesn't really mean Pesach. It was just put in there, but it's not really supposed to be there. They were just listing all the karbanos. They put that in, but it's not real. Rav Shesha says, no, my Pesach. What does it mean when it says that you can't eat the Pesach? It just doesn't mean the actual korban Pesach. It means that the owner can't bring the korban Pesach. It means the Shalmei Pesach. It refers to the shlamim that's associated with the Pesach. Well, the Gemara says, well, hainu shlamim. Isn't that the shlamim? Why does it have to say Shalmei Pesach and shlamim? No, Tana shlamim abba machmas Pesach. But Tana shlamim abba machmas atzman. Oh, list the shlamim that is accompanying the Pesach. You might have thought, since the Pesach can be in, the shlamim could also be in. So you have in the Otana Shlomin about Machmas Pesach. If you didn't list it, Tzachadai Tachamina, all Machmas Pesach also Gufay the Pesach Tamo. You might have thought since it's being brought with the current Pesach, it's like the Pesach itself, and so therefore it could be eaten along with the Pesach. Kamash Malan. So basically, we've seen two answers to the contradiction. The first answer is, well, Rabbi Shimon really says it's the Rabbanan, and the bride says that you can't bring the Pesach as an onain. We delete that from the text. The second answer is the answer of Rav Chisda, and that answer is that when it says that you can't bring the Pesach, it doesn't mean the Pesach; it means the Shamei Pesach. Rav Mari says a different answer. Mari says, "Lokasha kan shemeisol meis." Barbasar, Kvaro Barbasar. This is the same answer we had before. Conchames Lomes, Biyud, Conchames Lomes, Biyudal, the Kvaro Biyudal, in which case it's a biblical onin and he can't bring the Pesach. Conchames Lomes, Biyud Gimel, and the Mishim Sachim, which says that you can't bring the Pesach. That should make Bishul Shas or Gvar Bar Basar. So Erev Pesach was not the day of the death, the day of the burial, and so that's after the burial. And the reason is Mesel Meis Bar Basar, Gvar Bar Basar, Yom Misa Tofes Leil Midiaraisa. According to this approach of Rav Mari, if he died on the 14th and is buried on the 14th, then that day, the Aninos grabs hold of the night biblically. And so since he can't eat from it, he doesn't bring the Korban Pesach. Whereas Meitzel Meitz B'Shal Shas or Kvar Bar Basar, Derabanan, Eino Tofes, Laila, the Yom Kvur Midrabanan, Eino Tofes, Lailo, Ela Midrabanan. And so in that case, it's rabbinic. So I'm really Rav Ashi. Oh, we got to stop here. All right, Baruch Hashem. We'll go upstairs to Daven now.
Thank you.